Okay, so you might have seen in the chat that I sent a message like, hey, maybe think about what do we still need to do before we can actually start with the tournament. So what do we still need to prepare? What do we still need to add to DebbieCat? If you don't know, that's of course fine. There's still a couple of things you kind of need to do.
Well, I was just personally wondering, because I never worked with it, the private URLs and the online ballots, does that go automatically? How does that work?
Yeah, so that's I think one of the most important things we still have to do. So the private URLs and also the check-ins. And the other thing you would need to do, if that break is there, add speaker eligibility and another out round for example, a novice break. Yeah, I think those are the most important things. Next to the judge course, which you usually get later from the CAs.
Do the CAs add the motions in TabbyCat, or is that the tabber's responsibility?
CAs can do this, but usually as tabber you do it. Kind of assume when you're working with CAs that they're noobs.
Got it.
Not that there really are, but do take it into account that they don't know a lot about TabbyCat. You as a tabber know everything about TabbyCat, or that's the idea. You know more than they do. It's really simple to add the motion though, so sometimes they do. So with motions, I usually try to push CAs to give me the list of motion in advance so I can add them. Otherwise, I have to add them after they give it to me, which is usually after they make the draw. Sometimes, especially with offline tournaments, CAs have done this, that they just made the draw and then we're like, oh, let's go do the draw for everyone, and then completely forgot to give me the motion and I had to call them back. I think this happened at Leiden Open 2019, where I had to call them back like 2 or 3 times. It's just like, guys, what the fuck? We still need to do this. So make sure that you have that list in advance. Usually I give with that the example like, hey, sometimes they just bulk off without giving you the motion, so it also takes off the pressure from you guys. CAs sometimes don't want to do this because they're afraid that the motion will be leaked, or that you accidentally enter the wrong motion. But usually motion leaks are not. Motion leaks usually don't come from the tabber, because as a tabber you kind of have to well, you have to be able to keep secrets and not tell other people motions or speaks. Okay, so yeah, let's just continue. Alright, so here you're in the setup configuration. This is where you can do a lot of things. Here you can make a lot of changes. Most of them I don't think use. Let's see. So you can look around in this because it's very interesting and you can change all kinds of settings. But usually it's not that important. So feedback is an important one. So usually CAs want to have a scale from 0 to 10 or 1 to 10, so then you have to change the maximum judge score to 10. Sometimes people prefer to have all judges on each other. Sometimes they prefer to only have chairs give feedbacks on their panelists and trainees. But most often this option is used, so this one is also the one that's selected. and expect feedback to be submitted by teams on or list only. This makes a lot of sense for online tournaments. For offline tournaments, it makes less sense as people can also just walk up to Wings and be like, hey, I want some feedback. Can you tell me? I think usually with online tournaments, people approach the chairs more often than Wings. But with offline tournaments, it's easier to approach a wing instead of a chair. This will show you whether a judge is a trainee when they are submitting feedback on their chairs. So it will show you it's a trainee. So you take it more or less into account when considering someone else for a break. This, I barely use it. It's not that important, I think. Then feedback back introduction explanation. Usually I add the URLs with the speaker skills and the judge skills from the latest Euros. So that's Astana Euros. And I say like, hey, please provide feedback according to those skills. I just added, save the configuration, and then I have to save it. And then people can also find those skills there. Usually they also provide it on Discord or Facebook separately to people. With offline tournaments, there's usually at least a speaker skill printed. The judge skill hasn't been provided that often yet, but it hasn't, like, I think the first one came out about a year ago, and people were still kind of testing it, which is, I don't think, why they really printed and distributed it as much, but usually those skills were available online. Okay, so this is in the edit database area. Let's share my screen. Okay, so let's see. Here you have a lot of stuff. In general, if you want to know how this works, just click around and see what else. I haven't covered everything. You just go to adjudicator feedback. Then there's a lot of things that usually you just don't use. You usually don't go to these answers. You'll find them directly in TabbyCat as well. If you want to add questions, you click here, or you click the add directly. So there's already 2 questions in place. Did you agree with their decision? Yes, no, it's a drop-down answer type, and there's always comments. Usually I take this one out, but I don't always do that. It depends a bit. And then you can add feedback questions. So there's tournament, BP tab, sequence number. So you can just, if you sometimes you might want to add questions later. So usually what I do is for every question I add, I make a step of 10. So the first question I add will be 10, and the second question I add will be 20, and the third will be 30. So if I want to add questions in between, there's still a space, so I can make a question 31 or 32, for example, and then they would be with it between the third and the fourth question. So I put this one at 10. So then the question is so there's a lot of I've done this a lot, so it has a lot of questions already in there. So how well did they lead or participate in the discussion? It could be a question, and it like you can see here, it's like already put in. You can choose 1 to 10. Then the name would be, short name would be discussion. then the reference would be discussion, lowercase. You can choose, do I want this question to be asked only to adjudicators or also to teams? Well, teams are not there for the discussion, so of course you don't click those for this particular question. Answer types always necessary, so you can be a checkbox. Can also be yes, no, so I have to choose between yes or no. It can be an integer, so that's going to be a number. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So it can be a text box or can be a scale. It can be float. It's a different kind of number. Different text. You can select one or multiple. So there's a lot of possibilities when it comes to certain answers. I usually use integer text box. You can be like, okay, I do want everyone to answer this question or not. So you can make it a required question or not. So if it's specifically this one, for numbers, you can put it at 1, 10. So minimum value, and it goes to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. You save and add another. So I'm just going to add another question. So for example, this one, should this person be chairing? Sometimes this is added and sometimes not. This depends a bit on your CAs, on whether they want this question. And you can ask this to both judges and teams. What you can do is make this a yes/no drop down. What you can also do, instead of make it that one, you can make it select one or multiple. So for this one, it would make most sense to be select one. You can be like yes, and if that's the first choice, and if you want to add another choice, / no. And what you can also add for this one, what I usually do is, if you do not have enough information to answer this specific question, you can be like, so I usually add another option, which is more information needed. Sometimes you do not have enough information to actually judge whether this person would be capable to be a chair. So you then add that, and then people usually add something in the comments if they're not sure about this. And then you save. And then it just shows up here. So of course, what you want is not that the comments are something at the start, so then you have to open it and change the sequence number. So usually just put this at 100, and that's for and about. And the did you agree with their assertion is usually left out, but might sometimes be kept in. It completely depends. So if you want to delete this, you just go here, delete select adjudicator, feedback questions. Go. They're like, are you sure that you want to do this? He's like, yes, I'm sure. And then there's only 3 questions left. So you can add as many questions as you want. Yeah, that's basically it. Global settings, well, the only thing is there is whether you want to use an API or not. APIs are one of the newest features in TabbyCat, but it's really nice to use APIs so you can link it to other applications, which is incredibly important if you want to use, for example, Tabtastic. So tab release, you will use it after the tournament, of course. So it says release team tab, release speaker tab. Replies tab is not for BP. It is for WSDC tournaments. Sometimes you can also use the category tabs. So there's a separate novice team category, and same goes for speaker categories. Motions tab. I think it's really funny to have those motion tabs available so people can see like, hey, how balanced was this motion? If, for example, you only had like 8 rooms or something, it's not that relevant because one win already gives like 12.5% for that specific position. So it's less important. I know in Asia, it's people use the judge tab a lot. However, in Europe, it's not really used. And that's also, I think, from the standard that they want feedback to be able to be admitted anonymously. For online tournaments, some of these CA teams say like, hey, we can more or less give you some kind of feedback based on the feedback we have received, but they make it as anonymous as possible so people can't retrace where that feedback came from. Release ballots to public only works when all judges can add ballots and they can all vote separately. So that's not for most of the formats that we use. All round results. This one is, I think, the only one that can be used directly after the break, but I usually only just click it after the tournament has been done. Data entry. Sometimes I forget to go over this, and then people are like, "Oh, I can't find my ballot," which is kind of annoying because then you're like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I still need to change this." So ballot submissions, usually put it on private URLs, but that depends on whether they have their private URLs or not. Otherwise, use a publicly accessible form, but only uses if you have a paper ballot that can confirm the e-ballots. Otherwise, you use private URLs. Feedback submissions, either private URLs or publicly accessible form. Sadly, they don't have the option to have both. I would prefer to have both, but you have to choose between either one. So you have to think carefully. Am I able to give all the teams and all the speakers a private URL, provide them with that, or would I rather use a publicly accessible form? I never use a password for submission. Bypass double checking. I use this with online tournaments, but I'm not sure exactly what the difference is. Maybe that you have to check to click one time less per ballot. Blind confirmations is you don't use it except if you have a really large tournament, so usually with the Euros or Worlds, otherwise you don't use it. Motion selection is when debaters can pick their own motion, so it's for a different format. Participant shelf check-in is great, especially for online tournaments. If you use Taptastic, it's not necessary, but otherwise you should definitely use it with online tournaments because it saves the org team a lot of effort. So the ballot digit checks is for when you print ballots on paper and then they have the circle, so you can actually circle the last digit that they've written down for each score. Especially with offline tournaments, this is really helpful because sometimes people just can't write down shit. Like it's just sitting there like, I don't know, is this a 4 or a 9? So especially for larger tournaments, this is quite necessary. Otherwise, you have to keep calling people back to the tap room, which can delay the tournament quite much. And this is whether or not the motion will be on the ballot. If you print ballots before the draw and the motion have been released, you might want to do this, especially if you don't trust the people who will be printing the ballots to keep the motion to themselves, or whether you will distribute it to the rooms while the draw and the motion are being released, because then people might get to the motion before it has been released, which would be very unfair. public features. So I usually enable the public view of the participants list, which is really important for clashes. So people can check it in the participants list itself, otherwise the equity team has to make a separate list with all the participants. Diversity statistics only works if you know, for example, genders or regions where people come from. Is only used for larger tournaments, otherwise it doesn't make sense statistics wise. Institutions list, I sometimes do this. I don't think it matters that much. Check-in statuses might be useful, especially with larger tournaments, so people can double check whether they've been checked in. But they can also see this with their private URLs if they have some pre-allocated sites, don't use it. Usually just leave those on. Release team breaks to public and judge break to public after the break has been released. So people can find the break if they're not there for break night or whatever. Welcome message. You can add it if you want. Be like, hi everyone, very excited. Please fill out the clash form here, and you give the URL. And after the tournament, you can change it to like, hey, I hope everyone has fun. Congrats to the winners. Tournament staff, you can list your name, the organizational committee, and the CA team. Sometimes I leave the organizational committee out. That depends on whether I have all the names or not, but sometimes I just write out. The institution that is organizing it, it depends. And I usually also add the equity officer so people know who to contact. And then I just have configuration. UI options, I don't think there's much. If you want to use code names, you can use code names here. But it's usually not necessary. I think they did it once with Worlds, maybe twice, but it's not preferred. Team institutions might be nice if there's a lot of teams and people just want to know where their institutions are from, especially if they have made up team names instead of just their institutional name plus A or 1 or something. Show speakers in the draw, I usually leave it on so judges can double check like, hey, who is in this team? Do I want to judge them right now or not? Order to display motions. Yeah, it kind of says it for itself, earliest round first or latest round first. Notifications only works if you have a good emailing system set up. You can do this with SendGrid. However, there's one problem with it, is that if you make an account, you can use it unlimited for a month, and after that you can only send 100 emails per day. So it doesn't, you don't get there when you do a larger tournament. Like, you can send confirmations once, and after that you've used up all your emails. Manually set current round. I don't think this was ever necessary. Maybe once, but usually it's not necessary. Presets. Okay, so if you, for example, when you started creating a new tournament, and you're like, oh shit, I accidentally forgot to change it to BP, or I forgot to change it to WSDC, you can change it here. I think this is the AP variant, which is used in the Netherlands. But you can always double check it with the documentation. They're using it correctly. But it usually also says like, hey, this is 2 versus 2 with replies. This is 3 versus 3 without replies or with replies. So it also already gives you a lot of information about what it does. If you are not entirely sure, you can just click one, and it will also show you within the in those options what it's doing, especially within the draw rules and score rules, I believe that's an option.
Yeah, I can confirm that Canadian parliamentary is AP in the Netherlands, by the way.
I don't think there's a lot of difference between AP or WSDC or BP tabbing, except that there's more or less teams in a room, and sometimes there's like an extra reply you need to do, and sometimes they want to split speaks to style and argumentation and presentation. That's not an option within TabbyCat itself, so then you have to keep a separate spreadsheet where you split out those speaker points. Okay, so let me see. Yeah, so judge scores. So usually you get judge scores later after you added all the participants. Sometimes you can just opt to add judges later. Otherwise, you just add it here. So this is the current judges rating. This can change per feedback. You can change the weight of each feedback in the edit database area. I'll show later. You can also change the base score, so the score that it's currently showing. So so you can change base score here, and then you can just change it to, like, say, okay, this is 7, and then you save the base score. However, the annoying thing with this is that it has to reload the entire page. So what you can also do, which is a faster method, is go in the edit database to participants and judges, and then change base score here. So here you can, at the right, just change all the scores and then just save it in one go, which is, I guess, easier than reloading the page every single time.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I don't really get exactly the purpose of the adjudicator score. Is it just for, like, is it like the room preference?
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. So CAs use the judge score to rank judges. So for tournament, they just created this entire document which explained the algorithm. But basically with TabbyCat, it's like, so the higher the score, the higher the better the judge, and the higher the score, the more likely you'll end up chairing. So they use the scores so TabbyCat uses the scores as a reference and uses it in the algorithm, like, hey, I'm gonna allocate these judges here. And CAs use it like, hey, okay, so this is this person is in 2.5, and this person is 7, so this person should chair and this person should be a wing. One other thing is that if in TabbyCat you are ranked below 1.5, you will automatically be a trainee. You can change this, I believe. Wait, where is it? Sharing is annoying. I think you can change it in the configuration. Let's see. I think it's here. Yeah. So here it says, so it's in configuration draw rules, it says minimum adjudicator score to vote. So if a judge is ranked at 1.5 or higher, they can vote, otherwise they are trainee. So this really depends per CA team. They don't really have just like they don't really have one score that says this is a trainee or this is a wing. So I think they usually put it there or at 3 or 4. Sometimes they put it at 2.5. So let's just put it at 2.5 right now. Here it also shows you judge conflict penalty and history. So these are all used for calculating the draw. So it's more important, for example, to when you use the auto allocation method, I will show you later, that judges have seen teams before is more important to avoid than that teams have seen each other before, for example. And that also goes for like, this is specifically for clashes, so to make sure so you don't want clashes within the tab, so this penalty is here, so like if it calculates a draw, it makes sure that judges will not end up with judges that are clashed from or with teams that are clashed from. You can specifically check whether you want to avoid teams having to see each other twice or teams debating against their own institution. Usually it's not used. It might be used within the Euros or Worlds, but I'm not entirely sure. So this is if you don't want to allocate them, it's possible, but it's usually, I don't think it's ever used. I don't think I've ever seen it used. Skip judge check-ins is also barely used. But it might be you want to change that. So I don't think. So when you're at Reg, you want to have identifiers. So you want to have check-ins, for which you need to make identifiers. I don't know why this is a separate option, why you can't make it automatically. But you have to do it automatically, so you just have to make the identifiers. I don't think it's important for rooms, but for larger tournaments, you might want to do this so you can double check whether the room is actually open. Scan identifiers is only used if you have a scanner or whether you use a number. So this is usually used in larger tournaments. Otherwise, they just look up a person within this area. So this is also available in the assistant area, but also available in the admin area. So what you can do is you can check in an entire team. So you just click the check, or you can also do, if you want both speakers to be checked in separately, be like, okay, so Amber is here, but Axel isn't here. And that shows up like green, gray. It's striped, so it shows you that one of them is here, but the other one is not. So it's preferred to check people in by their speaker names, so you can see whether an entire team is here or not. Usually with Reg, when only one of the speakers is here, you do let them come to you and they have to iron person, or if their teammate shows up late, they can still join with the entire team. But sometimes it's preferred to not have iron persons, especially with out rounds. So not that often. Can you stop? Sorry, my boyfriend's being annoying. but this also depends on what the org team or your CA team wants. So usually you just do the speakers, and sometimes you're like, okay, so both the teams, both speakers are here, or if one of them is here, that's fine. So you just check both of them. And for judges, of course, you only check like the judge there. So I think that's more or less it for starting a tournament, except one other thing. So in the edit database area, you go to tournaments and rounds. So this is important when you have multiple breaking categories. So if you have a novice team, so if you have a novice break, you want to add an out round. So you say like, okay, add round, select a tournament. So sometimes you have multiple tournaments on one instance, so you have to select tournament, sequence number, so that's in which order rounds are displayed here. So this is 1, this is 2, semifinals 3, and grand finals 4. It depends a bit. Usually I put it in front of semifinals. We can also put it after the grand final. And that depends on when it's taking place. So sometimes if you have quarters, for example, you have quarters, semifinals, and grand final, and novice finals usually held at the same time as the semis. So then you want it to be after the quarterfinals, but before the grand final. Right now I'm just going to do it after the grand final is 5. So completed is not the case. The name, you give it a novice final, abbreviation is NF, or whatever you prefer, but if semifinals is SF and grand finals GF, it's usually NF. If you have a Pro-Am final, it's BAF. Stage elimination, because it's an out round, it's also set here. Draw type, it's also elimination. Breaking category. So I haven't added another breaking category. You can do this separately, but you can also just add it here. Let me p-tab. So sequence number is 2 here because the open break is always a 1, so novice is a 2. But if you have multiple breaking categories except for those 2, you might want to prefer one after the other. So if you have open, ESL, and EFL, then you want first open, then ESL, and then EFL. If general is only for open breaks, otherwise you just leave it out. Priority. So if you have, sometimes people can break at both, and then if it's at the same time, then people have to choose between either breaking open or novice. So then you have to give it a priority, but you can also still change it. So I usually just give it a 1. I don't know what the open categories actually prioritize that, but I think it's about 100 or something. It's always higher than 1. Rule, it's always standard. And limit, if there's only so many teams you want to display in the public tab, which is almost never a limit on. Just save it. So then I've saved the category, and then I'm still within the out round that I wanted to add. Draw status can either be none, draft, confirmed, released, was almost always none. Feedback weight is important when you want to have the feedback that is there, especially for judge tabs, still be weighed in over the overall score. You have to mark it as silent, otherwise as soon as you enter the results, it will be shown as public on the tab, and then people will know the winner, which is not what you want, of course. And then you save it. So here in the tournaments and then rounds, it shows you round 1 and 2. Those are the out rounds. See, the first one, draw type is random. The other one is power paired, and other in rounds will also be power paired. The last round will always be marked as silent. It's usually preferred with 5 rounds that 4 and 5 are silent. So then you have to go here and mark round 4 as silent as well. This is motion released. Start set, I usually don't do anything with that. But you could potentially add a time, so you have to schedule within TabbyCat as well. And after break has been announced, you can, for example, uncheck round 2. So then it will also show on the public page without the speaker points, of course. And don't forget to click save afterwards, especially if you're in the edit database. Otherwise, it doesn't save. Okay, questions so far?
Also, I put a question in the chat because for me, it's just when I didn't go to a tournament, interesting to see what the motions are. Mm-hmm. You said about releasing the motions tab, but you can still release the motions without the tab, right?
Yeah, that's definitely possible. Sometimes they're left out. I'm not sure why tabbers do this, but I think in general they can be released. I think they're just in the. I think they're just in the tab release. Okay. So yeah, I think I've explained everything. Oh yeah, there's one thing is that when you're using an API, I think it's under dynamic preferences. No, it's here. It's under auth tokens. If you're using an API, you sometimes have to provide a token. I think it's automatically created for every user. So everyone has their own key. I think it's necessary for Taptastic to use it. And you just copy this number and you add it to a bot, and then the bot can edit the database for you. So you can do this for an admin user, but you can also do this for an assistant user. So then that API would have less access to the tab. And otherwise, like, it will have the same access to the tab as the user that has that key. To whom the key belongs to. So break qualification. The annoying thing is that if you mark speakers, oh wait, I'm doing this the wrong way. So if you mark speakers in a certain speaker category, it isn't automatically linked. Like, hey, if both speakers are marked as such, they will also be marked as a novice. So if you add speaker category, like novice, speaker category, but it's not automatically linked, sadly, to the breaking category. So it's participants, speaker category, add speaker category. So within the participants, you can go to speaker. And sadly, you have to click every single one to mark them as such. What you can also do is, let me see, in setup, and participants is here you can do speaker eligibility. Here you can also just add a speaker category if you don't want to do this in the add database area, and then you can just mark people as novices. And then they will also be shown in the tab as novices. This saves automatically. Do take into account that you can't edit this simultaneously as someone else, but then it saves only one of them, or it saves neither, and then just you have to do it like multiple times, which is kind of annoying. So if you forget to change it in the edit database category, you can also just add a speaker category here. So here it says novice, name is novice, slug is novice, sequence number is public. You can just add a couple, and in A you can choose between save and add more, or just save. So yeah, that's basically it, except for sending the private URLs. For that, you have to go to your Heroku dashboard. So your Heroku dashboard, just made a separate account, will show you a list of the tournaments that you've worked at. You click on Tab Workshop, that's the tournament we're using. And then it just gives you the installed add-ons. There's a lot of things you can configure here. I usually don't do anything with this. Go to settings and reveal config first. And it shows you a lot of things. And then here is a SendGrid username and password. You set this one to API key, and this one to the SendGrid key that you've made with your SendGrid account. Do take into account that if you make an account in SendGrid, that they have to confirm what the hell you're doing, that you want to send so many emails. So make an account a week in advance if you want to use it. Otherwise, you might end up not be able to use your SendGrid account. But if you're using Taptastic, again, you don't need to use it because the Taptastic bot automatically sends those private URLs to everyone.